My name is Ellie, and I'm 27 now. But what I'm about to tell you happened when I was just 11 years old. It's one of those memories that never really faded. If anything, it's just gotten clearer over the years. I haven't told many people about it. Just a few close friends, and even then I left some parts out because I didn't want them looking at me like I'd lost my mind or something. But it happened. I swear it did. Back then, my little sister June and I used to spend part of every summer out at our great-grandma's house in Tennessee. It wasn't near any town or neighborhood, just woods. Thick woods. Mostly pine trees, I think. And brush that grew up around the old dirt driveway, so narrow only one car could fit at a time. The house was small and old. Real simple. No air conditioning, barely any TV, and definitely no cell service. Looking back now, it probably would have driven a lot of kids crazy, but we loved it. It felt like our own little world out there. We spent our days exploring trails, climbing trees, and catching bugs. June was 8 at the time. She followed me everywhere, even when I didn't want her to. We bickered like sisters do, of course, but I always kept an eye on her. It was just the two of us out there with great-grandma most days, and with no neighbors around, we had to watch out for each other, and keep each other occupied. We thought we knew those woods like the back of our hands back then. Every little dip in the trail, every bent tree limb or hollow log. But there was one summer that everything changed. And that was the summer of 2009. Because something happened out there that I still think about way more than I should. It made me look at those woods different. It made me realize that sometimes the stories grown-ups don't want to talk about might be true. And it all started with a smell. And a hidden spot deep in the trees. And then the worst kind of feeling that crept over us like a shadow. I don't think we were meant to find what we found out there. And I don't think that whatever made that place liked the idea of us finding it either. Most days out there started the same. June and I would wake up to the sound of birds or the screen door creaking just as great-grandma stepped out onto the porch. She'd be sitting in her rocker with her coffee before we even rolled out of bed. The mornings were cool. The kind where the dew still clung to the grass and your shoes got soaked just by walking across the yard. We'd eat breakfast, usually eggs on toast, Grandma's specialty, and then we were free to roam, just as long as we came back before the sun dipped low. That was the rule. Don't go too far, and don't make me come looking. That's what she would say every morning without fail before we set out on an adventure. The woods behind her house were our playground. We made forts out of sticks and pine. We found trails that looped around and doubled back like mazes, and picked handfuls of wild berries when they were in season. June used to pretend we were explorers looking for hidden treasures. I'd humor her most of the time, even if I was secretly just enjoying the peace of being out in the trees. But, like most kids, we pushed our limits. Not in a big way, just enough to feel like we were doing something exciting. That one day, the day everything changed, we'd followed a rabbit-off trail of all things. It wasn't planned, just some sporadic adventure. We weren't sneaking around or trying to be bad. This just sort of happened. One minute we were walking the path like always, and the next we were stepping over logs and ducking under branches, chasing this little brown rabbit that darted through the brush like it had somewhere important to be. We must have gotten farther than we realized. The trees got thicker, and the light felt different. Dim almost, even though it was just past noon. June hesitated, said maybe we should turn back, but I told her that we'd be fine. I figured we'd loop around and find the trail again soon enough. We weren't lost, just off course. That's the thing about being a kid, you know. You don't always know when you've crossed a line until you're standing on the wrong side of it. The farther we went, the more things started to feel off. That's the only way that I can explain it. Just like something wasn't right. At first it was just little stuff. The trail we'd been following kind of thinned out, like it hadn't been used in a long time. Then the trees started pressing in closer together, so close their branches scraped our arms as we passed by them. And then everything got really quiet. Not just regular quiet, but wrong quiet. No birds or bugs or anything. And my little sister noticed it too. She reached for my hand without saying anything, and I let her grab it. I was starting to feel weird too, like something was watching us, even though I couldn't see or hear anything. And that's when we smelled it. That smell hit us all at once. Thick and sour. Heavy like old meat that'd been sitting out in the sun for too long. It made my nose burn and my eyes water. June even gagged and covered her face with her arm, and I could tell she was on the edge of crying. "I don't like this, Ellie. Let's go back." But right then, I saw something through the trees. It wasn't far off, maybe 30 feet or so ahead. The ground dipped beneath a fallen pine tree. At first I thought it was just a shadow, but the shape was all wrong. It looked like a hole, or maybe even a little cave tucked into the earth. Something didn't sit right about it, though. The brush around it was piled up in strange ways, like someone, or something, had tried to cover it up without really even hiding it. There were big sticks jammed into the ground like supports, and pine branches laid over the top like a roof. From where we stood, it looked like it was dug out, but deeper than anything a fox or groundhog could make. This thing was just too big. It didn't look like anything a person had built either. At least, not anyone trying to be neat or smart about it. It was messy and wild, but also intentional. Like a nest, but wrong on so many levels. I don't know how else to describe it. I stepped forward without even thinking. Ellie begged me not to. I didn't tell her, but I already had that crawling feeling under my skin. The one that tells you that you're somewhere you shouldn't be. I guess part of me just thought I needed to see what it was. Like, knowing might make that feeling of fear go away. It didn't, though. Not even close. Because the closer I got, the stronger that smell got. Like death. It clung to the air, and it made my stomach flip. I pulled my shirt up over my nose, trying not to gag. When I reached the edge, I peeked inside, though. At first, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. The inside was a lot darker than I expected, but there was enough light filtering through the trees that I could make out shapes. Piles of them. Bones. And a lot of them. Some were small, rabbits and squirrels, maybe some birds. But some were also bigger. Long leg bones, too, and a skull that looked like it could have come from a deer. One pile of these things had tufts of fur still clinging to the skin. Another had a ribcage that looked half crushed with flies buzzing thick around it. There were scraps of hide stuck to the ground, pieces that looked torn, not cut, and everything about it just felt violent. I didn't say anything about it, and I didn't move for a while either. I was just taking in this sight, just staring, trying to understand what kind of animal would do something like this, or what kind of animal was even capable of this. But the more I looked, the more things just didn't add up. There were claw marks in the dirt, long ones that raked through the earth like something had paced back and forth. I looked up, and I saw more of them scratched into the tree trunks nearby, way higher than I could have reached, even if I was standing on June's shoulders. And I thought to myself, what kind of animal could reach up there and make those kind of marks? And that's when June stepped beside me, pulling her shirt up over her nose too. She took one look inside this den and froze. And that feeling hit us both at the same time, like we were stepping into a room where something bad had just happened. And worse than that, like we weren't alone anymore. Like something was there with us, watching us, just out of view. Right then, we had the same idea. Run. So we did, and we didn't stop running, not once. The trail felt a lot longer going back. Most of it felt like it was uphill, and the sun was beating down on us. But we didn't care. We don't even remember getting tired. I just remember the sound of our feet on the dirt and the way the trees looked like they were leaning in, watching us go. June tripped once on a root, went down hard on her knee, but she popped right back up like it didn't even hurt. I think at that point, she was just so full of adrenaline that it didn't even matter. Neither of us even said anything the whole way back. We just booked it home. Looking back, there wasn't anything actually to say. We just were overcome with that fear and needed to get out of there. Just needed to be home. Just needed to be somewhere safe. When we finally saw Great Grandma's house through the trees, I think we both let out a breath we'd been holding the entire time. We burst through the back door into the kitchen. We were red-faced and covered in sweat and dirt. Great Grandma was at the sink peeling potatoes, and she turned around real slow when she saw us. "What in the world happened to you two?" she asked us. We started talking over each other, trying to explain. Bones, fur, the smell, the hole in the ground, the claw marks. I didn't know how much of it came out making sense, but she just stood there listening, her eyes fixed on us the whole time. She didn't laugh, didn't brush us off. When we finished, she set the peeler down and wiped her hands on her apron. "Sounds like you girls found something you weren't meant to find," she said. She was calm as ever, and that shut us right up. She looked out the window above the sink for a long second, and then finally turned back to us. "You listen to me now. Don't go back out there. Not to that spot, not even close. The woods got things in them we don't always understand. Best not to go poking around where you don't belong." We nodded and didn't argue. I had absolutely no intention of ever going back to that spot. Then that night, after dinner, she went around the house, checking every window and door more than once. She drew all the curtains too, even though it wasn't dark outside yet. She didn't say why, but she didn't really need to. We hadn't stopped thinking about that thing ever since we got back home. Something was out there that shouldn't be, and it made a den bigger than both of us. We stayed close to Great Grandma the rest of the night. Here's what you need to know. Great Grandma's house was old. Real old. Wood creaked if you so much as breathed wrong, and every door had a screen that rattled when it shut. Like I said, there was no air conditioning, just a few box fans humming in the windows, stirring up hot air that didn't help much. And that night was worse than usual. It was still and heavy, like the air didn't want to move. We were camped out in the back bedroom, June on her little cot and me on a twin bed against the wall. There was a fan buzzing softly in the corner, but it didn't drown out the way the house groaned every now and then. June couldn't sleep. I could tell by the way she kept rolling over. I was in that half-sleep place, not really dreaming, but not quite awake either when I heard this noise. It sounded like footsteps to me, not like a squirrel on the roof or a raccoon on the porch. These were slow and heavy, crunching on the gravel path that led up from the trees to the house. Whatever it was moving around slowly and intentionally. I froze. My eyes opened. I held my breath, trying to listen past the fan. Step. Pause. Step. Pause. I slipped out of bed real quick and tiptoed to the window. I was pressing myself against the side of the frame so I could peek out without being seen. At first, I didn't see anything, just the yard and the tree line beyond it, and the moonlight over the yard. But then I saw it. It was something tall and black, not moving or making a sound. It was standing by Great Grandma's car, half hidden. If I hadn't been looking straight at it, I think I would have missed it. This thing was standing that still, and was easily blending in with the shadows, but there it was. Way taller than a person. The shape of it was all wrong too. Its shoulders were all hunched up. Its head was too high. I couldn't make out its face, but I knew it was looking at the house. I backed away without thinking and bumped into June, who was already out of bed, wide-eyed and terrified. I pulled her down with me beneath the window, and we sat on the floor holding our breath, straining our ears. And that's when we heard it again. This was a low sound from the side of the house, like a growl or something, or maybe just the sound of something breathing real deep and slow. June grabbed my hand tight. I didn't say anything. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might wake the whole house. Then we heard noises for the third time. These were more footsteps, and they were around the side of the house now. Gravel crunching slowly like this thing was circling us. The door to the bedroom creaked open, just a little, and Great Grandma came in, wearing her robe and holding a flashlight that wasn't turned on. She didn't say much, just walked over, knelt beside us, and whispered, "Don't look out the window. Stay right here." Honestly, I didn't know what the hell was going on, but I was just glad to have an adult in the room. And Great Grandma had this presence about her that just made you feel calm. Needless to say, we didn't move. But then, not a minute later, something banged against the front porch steps hard. Not like a falling branch or something. This was loud, like something heavy had stomped or kicked it. The boards groaned under the weight, and the screen door rattled even though nobody touched it. Great-Grandma stayed kneeling there with us, one hand on my back, the other on June's shoulder. We didn't move an inch. It must have been an hour that we sat there, quiet as we could, pressed into the wall of that old bedroom. Every now and then, we'd hear a noise outside, just like another creak, another shift on the gravel. Like whatever it was hadn't left yet. June's hand stayed locked in mine the entire time. And then I don't know what made me do it. Maybe just that curiosity, that desire to know what was going on. But I slowly got to my knees and peeked over the bottom of the windowsill again. June whispered my name like she wanted me to stop. But she didn't stop me. And Great-Grandma didn't either. She just watched quietly. This time, I saw it plain. It was closer now. Stepped into the yard maybe 20 feet from the house. It was near the garden where Great-Grandma kept her tomatoes. It was standing on two legs, but it was hunched forward, knees bent a little, like it wasn't used to standing like a person. Its arms were hung low. They were long and thick, and these paws were attached to them that looked like they'd been stretched out into something that resembled a hand. They looked like they could wrap clean around a grown man's chest. It had black fur. It looked thick, and even matted in some spots, especially around the shoulders and upper back, where this mane looked like it had formed from longer hair. The shoulders themselves were huge. Honestly, it was built like something that did a lot of tearing and pulling. What I was looking at wasn't a bear, I could tell you that for sure. The head was shaped wrong for that. Too narrow at the muzzle. Too long. It looked like a dog or a wolf, only way bigger and standing upright. It had ears that stood upright too, twitching now and then, and its neck kind of jutted forward like it was sniffing. And then it lifted its snout and turned its head just a little like it was trying to catch a scent of the wind. I was terrified that it was trying to catch our scent. That porch light Grandma kept on caught its eyes for a second, and then it turned its head. The eyes looked like they were glowing. Not bright like in the movies, just a soft amber shine like they were reflecting the light instead of making their own. That was the moment I felt true fear. Like my body knew something my brain couldn't even explain. I ducked down again and hugged June. I was past terrified now. We could hear it circling, taking slow steps, moving along the outer wall, twigs snapping underfoot, gravel crunching near the back porch. It wasn't rushing or trying to get in. It was investigating, like it was looking for a weak spot or a way that it could easily get in. Grandma hadn't moved. She sat there with us, dead quiet, like she knew not to challenge this thing. I'll never forget the way the house felt right then, like the whole place was holding its breath with us. It was just before dawn when I think it left. We never saw it walk away. We just noticed the sounds had stopped. There wasn't any more crunching of the gravel or sniffing or banging on the house. None of us slept that entire night. We just lay there waiting for something else to happen. Eyes heavy and exhausted, but still awake. By the time the sun came up, Grandma was already up and dressed. Still though, she didn't say much, just told us to stay inside and not to open the door for anyone but her. She went out onto the porch with her rifle, while me and June watched from the window. She didn't move fast or panic. She just stepped carefully like she was already expecting to find something. After about a minute, she crouched down in front of the steps like she was studying the dirt. Then she moved to the side of the house, dragging her hand along the wood like she was checking something. She came back in without another word, and I could tell by her face that whatever she saw wasn't normal. She sat down at a table and told us, "I'm gonna call your Uncle Mike. I think he ought to come pick you girls up this year." We didn't argue. That day, she didn't even let us go outside. We kept the curtains drawn, kept the doors locked, even during the daylight. And we spent the rest of the morning packing our stuff and pretending like everything was fine, but all three of us knew that it wasn't. When Uncle Mike, who's my dad's brother, got there, she showed all of us what she found. I don't think she had intended to show us at first, but since we were curious, I think she thought that maybe it was okay to show us what she found. There were tracks all around the house. Big ones. Very canine-shaped, not round like a bear. They looked more like dog paws, only longer and stretched out weird, like whatever left them had fingers instead of toes. Each print was longer than my foot and deeper in the dirt than even Uncle Mike's boots would have gone. There were claw marks all around the outside of the house, too. Not gouges, but these long, shallow scrapes that ran across the wood under one of the windows, where the paint was just scratched off. I remember thinking how high up they were, too. Too high for any regular animal. Whatever that thing was, it had come looking for us. It had caught our scent out in those woods, maybe even followed our tracks straight to the house. It didn't try to get in, but it came close enough to let us know that it could have, if it wanted to. And that was worse in a way, knowing that this thing was intelligent enough to try to intimidate us. We never went back to that spot. Even as we got older, when we'd visit Great-Grandma again, we stayed close to the house. We still played in the woods sometimes, but only right in the backyard, where we could still see her and hear her if she called for us. It took a long time before I even felt okay being out in the woods again at all. Even now, as an adult, I still get that tight feeling in my chest if I'm too deep and it gets quiet. Great-Grandma passed away about 5 years after that summer. She never brought up that incident again, and neither did we. But I've never forgotten the way she acted. How she didn't laugh or tell us we were imagining things. She believed us. She was just born in a different age, I guess, and took things as they were told. I don't know what her reasons were for that, or maybe if she'd seen something herself, but I think about that sometimes. I think about if that thing was out there, and it had stayed long enough to make a den. Had they interacted before? As for what we found out there, what that den was, what came sniffing around the house that night, I still don't really have true answers for. Maybe it was just some predator, something rare that wandered in from farther off. But I've read about animals all my life, and I've never seen anything that fits what we saw. This thing stood like a man, but it didn't move like one. And no dog or bear or wolf or coyote I've seen leaves tracks like that, or circles the house like it's thinking, or tries to draw fear and intimidation like this thing did. Sometimes I wonder if it knew that we'd found its den, if we'd gotten too close to something we were never meant to see, and that's why it came to us. To tell us to stay away. To scare us with a warning. Maybe it didn't mean any harm. Maybe it was just telling us, that's my area. This is how it feels when you intrude on that. All I know is I hope no one ever stumbles across that place the way that we did. Whatever it was, it didn't want to be found. And I don't think it's the kind of thing that lets you walk away twice. My name is Mia Sorensen. I'm 31 now, but what I'm about to tell you happened when I was 24. I was born and raised in Kongsberg here in Norway. There's this old pine forest all around. It has quiet roads that twist through the hills and a lot of history that goes back hundreds of years. The trees here are tall and thick, and in the fall, the smell of damp earth and pine needles hangs heavy in the air. It's beautiful, and peaceful most of the time. The kind of place where you'll feel safe walking at night. For a few years in my early 20s, I worked at a local pub near the center of town. It was a small place, nothing fancy, but it paid the bills. I usually closed up around midnight and walked home alone. I didn't think much of it. The walk wasn't even too far, maybe 25 minutes, and the road was quiet but familiar. I'd passed the edge of the forest where the trees leaned close to the road. I never had a problem before, never even felt unsafe, because Kongsberg was a safe place. But that night, everything felt different. I didn't know it then, but I was being watched by something. Something that was out there in the dark, just beyond the edge of the trees, following me the whole way home. and that's when the fear really started to kick in. The air was getting colder as the night wore on. It was autumn, and the temperature was dropping quickly. The sky was mostly clear, but the patches of clouds drifted in front of the moon every now and then, and cast this flickering type of shadow over the road. The moonlight gave just enough light to see the huge rough edges of the forest lining the path. I took a deep breath, pulled my jacket tighter, and started walking. The road was narrow and barely lit by a few dim streetlights that were spaced far apart. On one side, there were thick pine trees pressed close to the asphalt. On the other were a few scattered houses with their porch lights glowing softly in the distance. It was quiet except for my footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. I was just thinking about how nice it was to be alone sometimes, how peaceful my walk usually was, but I had no idea that this time something was waiting in the dark, watching me as I walked home. It was only about 5 minutes into my walk when I started getting this strange feeling, like someone was watching me. It wasn't something I could put my finger on exactly. There were no footsteps behind me, no voices or anything, just this heavy, creeping sensation that I wasn't alone. I shook it off at first, thinking it was just my imagination. And then I heard it. Soft sounds like leaves shifting or branches scraping together because something was moving. But nothing was clear enough to see what had caused the noise. I stopped and glanced over my shoulder, scanning the edge of the trees, but all I saw was darkness and shadow. Nothing moved. Nothing looked out of place. I told myself it was probably just a small animal, or maybe the wind blowing through the trees. I kept walking, trying not to let it bother me, but the noises didn't stop. They were still there, rustling just off to the side, but they didn't match the rhythm of my footsteps anymore. They'd come a little after I stepped, or a moment before, almost like something was following me but trying not to be seen. And that's when I started noticing a smell. Faint at first, barely there, but growing stronger the longer I walked. It was sour and strange, like wet dog mixed with metal, maybe copper or something rusty. It made my stomach turn, but just a little bit. I tried to ignore it. I'm a tough girl. I don't scare easily. But still, there was this doubt creeping in. I wondered if maybe I should turn back, or maybe call someone. But I told myself to stay calm and keep going. It was just a wild animal after all. Or some part of the forest playing tricks on me. I'd walked this road dozens of times before and nothing bad had ever happened. But even as I kept moving, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it was still watching me closely. And I had this nagging feeling that it was waiting for the right moment to strike. As I kept walking, those fears were starting to get justified, because I started catching glimpses of something in the trees. It wasn't clear at first, just shadows and shapes, but these shadows and shapes were not right. At first, I thought maybe it was a deer or some other animal, but what I saw was too tall and moved too quickly for that. And it was too quiet. This thing, even as big as it was very graceful. It wasn't making the kind of noises that a deer would. No sudden twig snapping or the usual startled sounds when it gets spooked and runs off. Whatever this was moving meticulously. I only caught parts of it at a time. Sometimes I'd see a tall figure, hunched low, slipping from one tree to the next, staying just out of sight from the moonlight. It seemed to be keeping pace with me, but always staying in the shadows where I couldn't get a good look. I could never make out a clear shape, just a dark blur against the black trunks. I knew then that something wasn't right, because no animal can stalk you like that, dipping from tree to tree when you turn back to look at it. I'm not sure any animal has that kind of self-awareness. And now and then, I'd hear breathing. Not a quick pant or nervous gasp, but slow, heavy, steady breaths. It was deep and rough, like the breathing of a large animal. It didn't sound angry or aggressive, just big and close enough that it made the hairs on the back of my neck to stand up. The trees around me rustled more often now, not from the wind, but from movement. Something pacing me through the forest. Every time I turned back to look, the rustling stopped, and I'd catch only the faintest hint of a shape slipping behind a tree again. To me, it felt like this was a game to this thing, and I was the only one playing by the rules. The feeling in my chest wasn't normal fear anymore. It was deeper, a kind of primal fear I didn't know that I had in me. I tried to breathe slowly, tried to calm myself, but my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. And that smell was only getting stronger. That sour, wet dog and metal smell filled my nostrils, making it hard to think straight. I pulled my jacket collar up and tried to focus on the road ahead. Tried to think of anything to get my mind not to be so scared. I thought about pulling out my phone to call someone. Anyone. But I already knew there was no signal there. There was no bars or way to reach help. I was alone with whatever was out there, moving with me in the dark, and the only way that I would be safe is if I kept moving and got home. And then about halfway through my walk, I came to a small wooden bridge that crosses a narrow ravine. I've always hated this part of the road, even during the day. The bridge creaked under my feet, and the trees on either side leaned in close, blocking out most of the moonlight. The ravine below was dark and deep with nothing but shadows and old rocks. From there, something about this spot always made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. As I stepped off the bridge and onto the other side, I heard it. Something snapping behind me. It was like a loud crack of branches breaking. My heart jumped, but I still didn't run. I told myself over and over that predators chase runners. If I stayed calm and kept moving steadily, I'd have a better chance. So I forced myself to slow down and take even, measured steps. But the entire time I was walking, I was terrified. I tried to keep my breath steady, but my senses were wide open. Every rustle, every snap, every tiny sound was caught by my ears. I was very aware of the situation that I was in, and very aware of everything that was happening around me. Then, about 10 feet away from me in the bushes, something shifted. I froze, my eyes darting towards the movement. For a split second, I thought I saw an arm, or maybe a leg. Something bent wrong, though, twisted in a way that no human limb should be. It was dark, and it didn't move like a person, and I thought to myself, how did this creature get so close without me even realizing it? And I realized whatever I was dealing with wasn't a normal animal. It was something from somewhere else. You hear a lot of superstitions, especially in my family, but I never really thought much of them until I was in this situation. And I thought to myself that whatever I'm dealing with right now is possibly from another world completely. Not an alien, not that kind of world, but some other dimension. And I knew then just how much trouble I was in. It felt like whatever it was toying with me, playing some cruel game. Not attacking, not running off, just watching me and testing me and trying its damnedest to scare every whit out of me. I swallowed hard and kept walking. I knew that if I stopped, I would be dead. I know I sound like I was very calm during this entire situation, but you have to understand, I had no other option. I had to keep moving, or risk being attacked. Even though every part of me screamed to bolt, I knew that I needed to stay calm. I knew I had to keep my wits about me, even though that thing was trying to scare all of them away. But that didn't make the dread any easier to bear. When I finally got close enough to the edge of my neighborhood, the trees finally began to thin out. The road widened a bit, and I could see a few scattered houses with gravel driveways. Of course, at this hour all their windows were dark, except for one or two porch lights that were still glowing softly. And of course my house was the last one on the street, so I still had a few houses to go before I was safe. In the distance, I saw my porch light like a beacon. For a moment, relief washed over me, like maybe I was almost safe. I was almost there. But then that feeling of dread hit me like a truck. For some reason, my body felt like whatever was stalking me was losing its patience, that it wasn't going to play with me much longer, that it was about to attack and show itself. Before I even thought about it, that panic took over me and I broke into a run. My legs moved so quickly I thought that they were going to tangle up with each other and I was going to fall. But still, I pumped them as hard as I could as I sprinted down the gravel road. And then behind me, I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, steady steps that matched my pace. This thing was speeding up. It was chasing me, and I could hear the breathing too. This deep, loud, panting, right behind me, like it was so close I could feel the heat from its breath on my neck. And now that smell was overwhelming. Sour, wet dog mixed with metallic tang filled with the air around me, like it was right on my heels. It made my stomach churn. It made my lungs burn, but I kept running. My eyes were locked on the porch light ahead. I knew that I was almost safe. I just had to get there. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see what was following me. All I wanted to do was get inside, lock the door, and be safe. I reached my porch, out of breath, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. My hands were shaking so badly I fumbled the keys from my coat pocket. I couldn't get the key in the lock fast enough. But finally the door clicked open and I pushed it just wide enough to slip inside. I honestly felt like I was in some scary movie, and this was one of those chase scenes where you're not sure if the person you're watching is going to make it or not. But just before I closed the door, something made me turn around. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was fear mixed with curiosity. But I looked back. I couldn't help myself. I needed to know if I needed to slam the door on this thing, or kick it away, or run through the house and get to the back door and get out of there as this thing continued to chase me. It wasn't right behind me, but it did step out of the dark. It was bigger than I expected. Easily 7 feet tall, hunched over like it was built for stalking through the forest shadows. Its face was like a wolf's, but twisted somehow. It had a long snout with sharp edges, and an eye that glowed a dull, sickly yellow in the dim porch light. The other eye, I think, was missing. Its fur was matted and patchy. It was black and gray, like maybe it was old. And the hair was sticking out unevenly all over the place, like it hadn't seen a brush in years. It had a thick tail twitching behind it, which looked also very matted. The arms were long, hanging low with fingers ending in claws that looked sharp enough to tear through anything. And the teeth caught the porch light, shining like they were these jagged, uneven forms of death. It didn't growl or rush me, it just stood there staring. That yellow eye locked on mine like it was sizing me up, or maybe even warning me. I slammed the door hard, fumbled the lock, and then I backed away. I was trembling, and despite how cold it was getting, I was sweating. I sank down onto the floor, unable to stop shaking. I had just seen something that looked like a werewolf. I was still panting, but it wasn't from running now. It was from how scared I was. I didn't sleep a wink that night, obviously. I stayed up with every light on in the house, clutching this small knife that I kept in the kitchen drawer. Every sound made me jump. There were branches scraping the window from the wind. The wind moved through the trees outside, making them dance. But I thought that it was that thing out there, still trying to follow me. And I just kept waiting for it to come back. Luckily, it never did. And that was the only time in my life that I'd ever seen that creature. I never told the police. Who'd believe me? A story about some half-seen creature stalking me through the woods? I figured it would only make me look crazy, so I kept quiet. I mean, it's not every day that a girl goes to a police officer and says that she was chased home from a pub by a werewolf one night. That's just grounds for being checked into a mental institution, isn't it? A few weeks later, I quit my job at that pub. I couldn't bring myself to walk that route again, not after what happened. And I didn't have a car at that point, so walking was the only way that I could get to a job. I found other work closer to home, and I made sure to never be out that late. I made sure that when I got hired, it was a day shift. I still live in Norway. This place is beautiful and I will never leave, but I stay away from that area completely. Hopefully, I won't even have to go into the woods from time to time when I get too spooked. It's not always that easy, though. I don't know exactly what it was that I saw that night, and I won't try to name it or explain it either. I think talking about it might actually make it come looking for me again, but I think emailing you about it is a safe bet to get my story out. I know what fear really is after that night. Not just the panic you get when something scares you suddenly, but the cold, steady feeling of knowing something out there is watching you, and it might just see you as prey. My name's Jake. I've been working on the cattle ranch out here in eastern Montana for close to 10 years now. The ranch sits pretty remote, surrounded by rolling hills and open grasslands, with the nearest town a good hour's drive away. It's the kind of place where you know the land like the back of your hand, and the only sounds at night are the wind and the lowing of the cows. I worked along 2 other ranchers that night, Mike and Carl. Mike's been with us longer than anyone else. Easygoing, but solid as a rock when it comes to handling the cattle. Carl's a bit younger, but knows his way around the ranch like a pro. We all got along fine, trusted each other, and had that kind of easy friendship that comes from working hard together day in and day out. It was about 8 years ago, late spring, early May maybe. The weather was calm that night, cool but not cold. The sky was clear, and there was a soft breeze blowing through the grass. Everything felt normal, like any other night on the ranch. The cows were settled in for the evening, chewing cud and making these soft, low sounds they usually do. The crickets were out, and an owl hooted somewhere in the distance. I remember thinking how quiet it was. No trouble, no problems, just the usual peaceful night out on the range. I had no idea how fast that was about to change. I was just about to head inside for a few beers with the boys when I heard it. The loudest, most frantic commotion I've ever heard out on that ranch. It wasn't just 1 or 2 cows making noise either. It sounded like the whole damn herd was losing their minds. The cries were raw, desperate, and honestly it sent a chill right down my spine, because I'd never heard a noise like that before in my entire life. I grabbed the flashlight off the porch. I hollered at Mike and Carl, "Hey, get out here. Something's wrong with the cattle." Mike was already coming out of the barn, and Carl wasn't far behind. The 3 of us took off running towards the pens, the beam of the flashlights cutting through the dark. The night out there is black, but the moon was up that night, just enough to make out the shapes and shadows. There was a slight fog rolling in, giving the whole place a sort of hazy, eerie feeling. The wind had picked up a little bit too, rattling the fence wires and making these trees whisper. As we got closer, the sounds grew louder and more desperate. Cows bawling like I've never heard, mixed with this weird growl that I couldn't place. It was like something was out there, and it was upsetting the cattle worse than any predator that I'd have ever seen. We reached the pen, heart pounding, ready for whatever was causing all the noise. We got into the pen though, and that's when I saw it. The first cow was still alive, but barely. It was lying on its side, breathing hard and covered in blood. There were these gashes all over its side like something had clawed it up real bad. And I could see bite marks too. Ripped open flesh and torn skin. The poor thing was shaking, but it didn't try to get up. I don't think it could at that point. It just looked scared and hurt. Not far from it either was another cow laying dead. The wounds on this one were even worse. Its body was torn apart in places with these big chunks of missing meat, and the skin around the areas were just absolutely shredded. It looked like whatever did this didn't hold back. Even at that point, when I was just assessing these wounds, before I even saw anything else, I was thinking to myself, what in the hell could do this kind of damage that quickly? The smell hit us next. Blood mixed with something else. Rotten meat, maybe the smell of a wild animal's den. It was sharp and sickening. It made me want to vomit, honestly. Mike and Carl were quiet, just staring at what we found. I don't think any of us could believe what the hell we were looking at, because we'd seen a lot out there, but none of us had ever seen anything like that devastation. The way those cows were torn up, it wasn't like anything normal that a predator could do around here. Coyotes, wolves, hell, even bears don't leave wounds like that. We all just stood there for a moment, trying to take it in, trying to figure out what could have done this. After taking in the sight of those 2 cows, we didn't just stand there any longer. Mike, Carl, and I started moving carefully around the rest of the pen, careful not to be trampled by these cows that were still terrified. We were shining our flashlights low to the ground, looking for anything else that might have been hurt or killed. And the quiet out there was different now, almost heavy. I mean, yeah, the cows were still going crazy, But it was like once we were out there, they started to calm down. But nothing else out there was making any type of noise. That normal ranch feeling was gone. Instead, it was replaced by this tension that was just hanging in the air, thick and dreadful, like something was watching us just beyond our line of sight. I could feel it in my gut. That uneasy feeling you get when something just isn't sitting right with you. And then not far from the pen, close to where the calves usually rest at night, Mike's light caught something. We hurried over and found one of the calves dead. The poor thing was lying awkwardly on its side. Its legs were all twisted up, and there were signs like it had tried to fight back. The ground around it was torn up like a struggle had taken place. And the wounds on this poor thing looked just the same as the cows. Deep gashes, big chunks of flesh missing, bite marks that were way too big for any normal animal. The calf's eyes were half open, glassy, frozen in terror, like it'd seen whatever got it and knew that it was done for. Mike's face tightened. I could tell he was getting real uneasy, and all we had around us right then were a couple of handguns. He kept looking over his shoulder like he was waiting for something to jump out at us. Carl, on the other hand, tried to stay calm. He kept telling us to stay focused, said we needed to check the whole area before calling it in. I wanted to go back and get some more heavy firepower, but I also just kind of felt frozen, like I didn't want to go off on my own. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was out there was huge and deadly, and that it was watching us. Some part of me just kept saying it's not just some animal. But it was something else, and it knew that we were there, and it wasn't scared of us. Now what you should know about me is I'm a superstitious fellow. I got a good imagination too, so I was spooked. I thought of this kind of stuff long before I even saw anything, but I never knew what a dogman was before that night. I thought maybe hell, could be a chupacabra, right? But even then I was like, can they cause this amount of damage in such a short time? The night felt colder all of a sudden too, and even though I was holding the flashlight steady, my hands were shaking a little. We kept moving slowly, but my eyes kept darting back towards the dark tree line, waiting for whatever was out there to make a move. We'd been searching the edge of the pasture when it happened. 1 minute, we were still looking for signs. The next, we were face to face with something I'd never even dreamed of seeing. Out of the shadows, just a few feet away, stood what everyone calls a dogman. You asked for a description. Well, here you go, fella. It was huge. At least 7 feet tall. Hell, maybe even more than that. It had the overall shape of a man, mostly, but everything about it was wrong and exaggerated. It looked just like a werewolf out of Hollywood, except it had a tail, and from what I gather from you, that's a dogman thing, not a werewolf thing. Its body was covered in this coarse, dark fur, pretty sure dark brown with patches of black. The hair was rough, almost like it hadn't been cared for in a long time. It was more muscular than even a primate that you see at the zoo, and honestly about 100 times more intimidating than some gorilla that you see behind glass. But its face was the worst part. It had a long snout, like a big dog or a wolf, with sharp teeth visible even when the mouth was closed. Its eyes caught the light from our flashlights and glowed this eerie yellow-green color, and it was just staring right at us like it was sizing us up. The way it looked at us made it seem smart, like it understood us more than an animal would. The arms were long, hanging low almost to the knees. Just the most exaggerated, creepy type of arm that you could ever possibly imagine. You could see the muscles rippling under the fur on these biceps. These arms were thick and powerful, and the hands were huge. I thought it could grab me by my face and fling me into the forest. It had these long fingers that ended in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through anything. And it stood with this tense, aggressive posture, like its body was ready to spring or attack at any moment. And looking at all those muscles, I was sure that those muscles were just coiled, waiting to pounce. I knew in an instant after seeing this thing that this is what had messed up the cattle. And as big as those animals are, I started to fear what it could do to us. Tiny, pathetic little humans. It started growling, this low, deep growl, and that sound just sent a chill through my bones. I could honestly feel it vibrating in my chest. It snarled at us, like it was daring us to take another step towards it, and bared those sharp teeth. Mike didn't wait. The second he saw this thing, he turned and ran back to the house, shouting for us to follow him. But Carl and I just stood there frozen, caught between fear and disbelief, I guess. I couldn't move, or even bring myself to raise my gun. We stood there for a few seconds, but when you're in a situation like that, a second can feel like an hour. And we just stood there, locked in place, while this dogman kept watching us, continuing to growl low, and then it slowly started taking a step towards us. Honestly, I can't tell you exactly how long we stood frozen like that, but when that thing started taking a step towards us, it felt like now it was hunting us, not just challenging us to a fight. And so I guess something snapped inside me. I heard Carl swear behind me under his breath, and I could see the same panic in his eyes when I turned to look at him. We both raised our guns, finally, but instead of standing and shooting steady, we fired as we ran. Short bursts, trying to just keep the creature at bay. I know it wasn't the smartest thing, and honestly we could have hit some of the cattle, but when you're in a situation like that, your survival is really the only thing that you're thinking of. I remember the sound of the gunfire echoing through the night. It was sharp and loud against the quiet of the ranch. But that dogman didn't stop. It took off after us, not afraid of the bullets. And it was moving faster than anything I've ever seen. I could hear this barking noise now, loud and guttural, like a beast that wasn't just angry, but furious. Like we'd pissed it off by raising our guns and opening fire, or maybe because it had to chase us. Its footsteps hit the ground hard and heavy, almost in time with my own pounding heart. I swear, I could hear it right behind me, with this wet, ragged breath, just coming at me relentlessly. And as I ran, I was breathing harder and harder, so the smell of that animal just hit me like a brick wall. That sharp, nasty, wild scent. We didn't look back much. Carl shouted for me to just keep running. Hell, partner, I did not have to be told twice. I just got the hell out of there like my life depended on it. The house was still a good distance away, but we pushed ourselves harder, adrenaline making my legs move faster than I thought possible. I'm a heavy guy, but that night I was a track star. When we neared the house, Mike was already running back outside with one of the rifles, aiming towards that thing and yelling at us to move out of the way. Then, just as we were almost to the porch, that dogman suddenly just stopped chasing us. It stood there at the edge of the trees, growling low, eyes fixed on us. I think it was deciding if it was worth the risk to come any closer. Maybe it was its smarts, because the way it looked, I could tell it knew more people were in the house, and probably armed and ready. Whatever the reason, this thing backed off, and started disappearing slowly into the shadows without a sound. I was baffled. Just the way that it recognized the situation made it look so intelligent that I couldn't help but think that it had some kind of human intelligence to it. And that hell, maybe it really was a werewolf, and it was self-aware. What else could it have been? We slammed the door shut behind us and locked it tight. I dropped to my knees, gasping for air, the gun still shaking in my hand. Like I said, I'm a pretty thick dude, so running that far, I thought I might actually have a heart attack. Carl was right behind me, breathing just as hard. He's younger and way more in shape, but I think after what we experienced, he just couldn't catch his breath. His face was as pale as a sheet. I thought the poor guy was going to pass out. But for the first time all night, we were safe inside. None of us said much. We just sat there trying to calm down, still hearing the silence outside that felt anything but quiet. None of us could seem to settle down though, and sleep was 100% out of the question. The adrenaline was still running high. My heart was still pounding so loud, it felt like it was going to burst right out of me. Every little noise outside made me jump, my hands twitching on the gun I kept close. And that house we were in, it felt so small, man. It was small and tight, and so claustrophobic, like we were trapped. But it was the only place that felt safe. That night, the sound started almost right after the dogman backed off. At first, there was just this low, inhuman barking from somewhere out in the trees. It was rough and deep and unlike anything I've ever heard before. Not quite like a wolf or coyote, but heavier and more tense. And then came the screams. They weren't human screams. Not at all. They sounded like something trying to mimic a person, though. A person mixed with animal howls. High-pitched, terrifying, and they seemed to echo all around us, bouncing off the hills and the trees like they were coming from every direction all at once. The howls that this thing made were long and drawn out, and chilled me right to the bone. It was like the sound of a wild animal in pain, but I also kind of got the feeling like it was trying to scare us or warn us off. I couldn't tell if it was one creature or more. Sometimes it sounded like several voices all at once. All the screaming and howling mixed together, it was shifting from close by to far away. I don't know if that thing was just out there running around making a hell of a noise, or if it was communicating with the rest of its pack. But I sure as hell wasn't about to go out there and find out for myself. And the wind there just carried those noises across the pasture, making them seem to stretch and twist in ways that still give me nightmares sometimes. At times, there were noises that didn't make sense either. Something like a low clicking or snapping sound, almost like this creature was trying to communicate or making threats. And I swear to you, I heard heavy footsteps pacing near the windows. But when I got the nerve to shine the flashlight out there, nothing was there but the dark. That fear that night was real, and it was thick, and it made the night stretch out longer than it ever should have. None of us talked much. There wasn't much to say. Just a lot of heavy breathing and swearing, and the constant sound of those terrible screams and howls. There were a few other people in there with us, but I'm leaving them out for their privacy. Just know there were 7 of us in total, including 1 child. You can imagine how tough that night was. It was one of the longest nights that I'd ever lived through. When the first light of dawn finally broke over the horizon, I didn't waste any time. After a night like that, none of us wanted to wait around. We headed back out to the pens to see what else the morning had in store. Of course, we were better armed. And the first thing we noticed was the calf that we'd found the night before was gone. Just gone. No sign of it anywhere near the spot where we'd left it. No blood trail, no tracks. It was like it had vanished into thin air, or that thing had just picked it up and ran off with it. Then, as we checked through the pens, we realized another calf was missing too. We'd counted all the calves the night before, right before all of this dogman nonsense happened, and now there were 2 that were nowhere to be found. But only one of them was confirmed dead. It didn't take long to figure out that whatever had come through that night had taken more than we'd seen, though. I mean, obviously, that's where the other calf went. The cow that we'd found badly wounded was still there, but it didn't make it through the night. We found it lying exactly where we left it, eyes glazed over. What shook us even more was that we found, half a mile away, more of one of the cows. The dead cow that we'd seen the night before specifically. The one with the huge wounds. It hadn't been where we left it. We found a trail of blood and deep drag marks in the dirt around the area where we saw the carcass. Whatever had dragged it there was strong. Stronger than any animal we knew around here. The size of the marks and the way the ground was torn up told us that. And of course, those of us that saw that thing knew what it was capable of. As we stood there looking at that poor carcass, all 5 of us that were out there started to think the same thing. There had to be more than one of those things out there. That's the only thing that would explain the way the attacks happened so fast, and the sounds we heard all night, and why so many cattle had been attacked. I don't think one animal would have an appetite that big. We never saw another dogman after that night. We cannot confirm whether or not there was more than one that night. All of us that were out there only saw the one, but we have our theories. After that night, there were no more growls or footsteps walking around by unseen creatures. It was like it or they passed through the area, found an easy meal in the cattle, and then just moved on. Still, I can't shake the feeling that whatever they were smart. Smarter than any animal that I've ever known. And they knew how to avoid people when they wanted to. It happened a long time ago now, but the memory of that night has stuck with me. I can still picture those sounds, that smell, but most of all the way those eyes looked right through me. Even now, years later, I still think about what we saw, and what we didn't. I'm a firm believer that there was more than one that night. Nothing on that ranch ever felt quite the same after that. I kept working the cattle, doing the same chores, riding the same fences, but there was this new edge to everything. Nights were no longer quiet breaks between long days. They felt like waiting rooms for something bad that was about to happen. And I found myself checking over my shoulder more often, listening harder to every noise in the dark, and trying to avoid being out there after the sun set. Mike and Carl felt it too. We didn't talk much about that night after a while. Not because we forgot. Hell no. I'll never forget that. But because we didn't want to dredge it up. It was one of those things that didn't make a lot of sense, but you knew was real. That experience, brother, has changed how I look at the land and the wildlife. I'd always thought that I knew what was out there. Wolves, coyotes, mountain lions, bears. I've seen all those type of predators in my life. But after what we saw, I realized there are things that don't fit into any of those categories. Things that are smarter, stronger, and more dangerous than any animal you can explain away. Hell, I'd rather come up against a lion or a leopard than one of these things ever again. And I'm still haunted by those eyes. The way that it looked at us, like it was sizing us up, maybe even warning us, or daring us to do something. It wasn't just some wild animal out there. It was intelligent. It knew what it was doing. It knew when to fight and when to back off. Like I said, I'm one of the believers through and through. I was before we even saw that damn thing. I just wonder where it or they went after that night. But more than that, I wonder what they truly are, where they come from, and how many are here. So I just want to say thanks, man. I appreciate you telling my story. Sincerely, Jake. My name's Daniel, and I'm not the kind of guy who goes around telling weird stories or believes in crazy stuff. I've worked construction and plumbing most of my adult life. I live in a regular neighborhood outside Atlanta, and the most excitement I usually get is the occasional traffic jam or a busted water heater. But what happened to me and my friends back in the summer of 2017 at Lake Hartwell, I haven't been able to shake it since. We were just out there to relax, have a few beers, maybe do a little fishing. 5 of us, old friends who'd known each other all our lives, just looking to unwind for a weekend. It was late June, hot as hell, muggy like it always gets in Georgia that time of the year. We rented an RV for the trip. Actually, rented is kind of a stretch. Mark borrowed it from his uncle. It wasn't brand new, but it had an AC, and bunks, and a bathroom. The works. We parked it in this small campground near the lake. There weren't many other people around. Most of the spots were empty, and we liked it that way. The trees were thick all around us, the kind that make you feel closed in, but cozy at the same time. If you stood in the clearing, you could barely see more than 20 feet into the woods without everything going dark. So it was me, Mark, Ricky, Jess, and my little sister Cadence. Cadence is 3 years younger than me, 25 at the time, and about 4 months pregnant when this happened. Her boyfriend couldn't make it, but she didn't want to be stuck at home, so she came along for the fresh air and company. She wasn't drinking or anything like that, just wanted to hang out with our friends and have a good time. By Saturday evening, we'd all settled into a groove. Mark had a fire going. Ricky was being his usual idiot self, cracking open beers with his teeth. Jess had made everybody sandwiches, and Cadence was curled up in a camp chair with a bottle of water, laughing at us all. I remember thinking this is exactly what I needed. Peace, quiet, and good people. Around 8 p.m., the cooler started looking a little sad. The beer was almost gone. There wasn't much ice left, and the chips were pretty much devoured. Mark offered to run into town, and Jess and Ricky jumped in too. It was about half an hour to the nearest gas station, so they figured they'd be back in about an hour or so. I didn't feel like tagging along, and Cadence didn't want to sit in a hot truck, so we stayed behind. The sun was starting to dip, but it was still hot. Not as brutal as earlier, but still kind of gross outside. I thought maybe we'd roast a few marshmallows once the sun went down, or just chill until the others came back. I had no idea what was out there with us, or how close it probably already was. I don't remember the exact time that everything went to hell, but it couldn't have been more than 20 or 30 minutes after the others took off. The sun was basically gone now, just a little light left bleeding through the tops of the trees. Cadence was sitting near the fire pit, flipping through something on her phone, and I was poking the fire with a stick, not doing much of anything at all. And then everything just changed. I didn't notice it right away. It crept up kind of slow, like the moment you realize the TV's gone silent after the background noise had been there all day. 1 second, everything was normal. Frogs doing their thing by the lake, cicadas buzzing in the trees, crickets chirping away. And the next, it was gone. Just gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd just zoned out, but then Cadence looked up at me. Her eyebrows scrunched, and she asked me if I heard that. I was about to say something dumb like, "Hear what?" but I stopped myself because I already knew. There wasn't a single sound. "I don't like this," she said, but her voice was kind of spooked now. She looked over her shoulder, back towards the woods, and said something's not right. And you know what? I felt it. She was right. Something was wrong. The air felt heavy, like before a thunderstorm, but worse. My ears started to feel weird too, like they needed to pop. That kind of pressure when you drive up into the mountains and your head gets all stuffed up, that's the kind of pressure that I was feeling. But there was no explanation for it. I stood up and looked around, but nothing was out of place. The RV was still parked where we left it, obviously. Chairs all in a circle around the fire, cooler sitting off to the side. The edge of the woods hadn't moved any closer, but somehow it felt like they had. Like that area was closing in on us and making it very claustrophobic. I can't explain that part well, other than that. It just felt like the woods were moving and closing in on us. It was like the tree line was watching us or something. Like the woods had eyes. Cadence hugged her arms around her little belly. "I swear I feel like something's looking at us," she said. I was scanning the trees. "Yeah, I know what you mean," I told her. Then, out of nowhere, I just started shivering. Not a chill or goosebumps kind of thing, but actually shivering. The kind where your teeth almost clack. I wiped my neck and realized that I was still sweating. My shirt was still plastered to my back from the heat, but I was cold. Like this deep cold that wouldn't go away. My body didn't match the air temperature anymore. And I looked at my sister and told her that I was freezing. She, of course, looked at me like I'd lost my mind and said it's still like 85 degrees out. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to because I couldn't explain it. She was right. It was still hot and sticky, but I felt like I'd been dropped into a freezer, and honestly, I don't know if that was my body trying to warn me that something was out there, or if this is just some kind of reaction that a human being has when one of those things is close. Seriously, my hands started to tremble a little. I rubbed them together out of reflex. But I was still confused because there was nothing in sight. There were no animals, no birds, just us. But I still had that deep feeling that something was wrong. Like we just weren't supposed to be there anymore. We were standing there in that awful quiet, both of us just kind of turning in this slow circle, assessing the area, trying to see something, or anything. And then we heard it. This growling noise that rolled out from somewhere past the trees. It wasn't loud at first. It was low, like thunder in the distance, but definitely coming from the forest. And it sounded like it came deep from something's chest. It was long, and it rumbled slow and steady. Whatever it was sounded massive, and it was like it was just letting us know that it was there. When I heard that noise, I instantly froze. Caden stepped closer to me and asked me if I heard that. All I could do was kind of whisper, yeah. My brain did what brains do in situations like that, I guess, because it tried to explain it away. I thought maybe it was a bear, or a big dog, something like that. Something normal, something that would be rational to think was out there. I wasn't thinking there was some kind of monster out there. Maybe just some kind of big animal that was gonna come in and scare the hell out of us. But no, that wasn't right. Even then, my brain was saying, you've heard dogs growl, even big ones. You've heard a bear growl. But this was different. I heard the bear growling up in Tennessee once, rummaging through my cousin's trash cans. This wasn't either of those things. Not a dog, not a bear. There was a kind of vibration to it too, like it didn't just come through our ears, but through the ground and through the air. And then more growling followed that. But after that, we started hearing things move around. There was this crunch, crunch of the leaves out there. Just a couple of footsteps, but it was enough. To me, it sounded big and solid, and kind of careless, like whatever it was wasn't trying to sneak up on us. I looked towards the trees again, but all I could see was the darkness of the forest between the trunks. Nothing moved that I could make out, but the sounds just kept coming. Crunch. Snap. Like a branch had given away under some serious weight. Cadence grabbed my arm hard, both hands wrapped around me. Her fingers were shaking. And then I felt it. Fear that doesn't just make your heart race. It's the kind that makes your whole body feel like it's underwater, like your legs can't move as fast because you're in this thickness. And my brain didn't seem to want to think anymore either. It felt like we were being sized up, honestly, like we were being hunted, like we were already on whatever it was' menu. I kept staring, trying to see anything in the woods. I could feel my heart pounding, but that brush was so damn thick that I couldn't make anything out. It stayed like that, just inside the darkness, just far enough to make sure that we couldn't see it, but we could hear it, and we could damn sure feel it. This ominous presence that was coming with it. Cadence whispered to me that there was something in the woods, but I already knew that. I just asked where, hoping that she had seen something. And to my surprise, she pointed with one hand, slowly, towards this thick patch of brush just off to the right of our campfire. It was probably 20 or 30 feet out. I stared hard. My eyes were still trying to adjust to the light that was getting lower and lower, and I didn't see anything, just shadows and twigs, some leaves barely moving from a breeze. It looked like nothing, honestly. But then Cadence screamed. Not this little startled yelp, but a full-on scary movie scream. She grabbed the front of my shirt and yanked me backwards with both hands, dragging me towards the RV door. Now, in a situation like this, where you can feel that fear creeping in and you can feel that you're not supposed to be there anymore, you don't argue when somebody grabs you and starts running the opposite direction. I didn't argue. I just moved with her, stumbling up the metal steps and slamming the door behind us. I even locked it without thinking. My sister backed away, hands on her belly like she was trying to protect the baby. She was shaking all over and pale as a sheet. "I saw its face," she said. But it was no more than a whisper, and she was borderline hysterical. "What do you mean, a face?" I asked. She was breathing hard, Her eyes locked on the window beside the door like it might be looking in. I looked back, kind of petrified, not gonna lie, and pulled that thing shut faster than anything. If something was out there, I didn't want it looking in there. And then I turned back to her, waiting for an explanation. There was something in the brush, looking at us. It looked like a wolf, but it was taller than you. I'm 6'5", by the way. There's no way a wolf is taller than I am. She stopped, swallowed hard, and tried to calm herself down. It looked like a damn werewolf, Danny. I didn't know what to say. She kept going on. It was high up. Too high. The face was like 7 feet off the ground. It was behind the brush but looking straight at me, just standing there. Then the eyes moved and I saw it. It blinked. And then it acted like it knew that I saw it, because it looked like it almost smiled. She was crying now as she recalled just moments before what had happened. I didn't question her. Not for a second. The way she said it, the way she looked, you could tell that she wasn't faking that kind of terror. Honestly, I don't think you can fake that kind of terror. And I remembered the growling noise. I remembered the footsteps out there. That pressure change in the air. Everything that pointed to something being out there. She was already moving before I said anything, pulling the rest of the blinds shut one by one. Her hands were shaking so bad she missed the latch on one of the windows twice before closing it and yanking down the curtain. I followed her lead, locking the door and going window to window, making sure each one was shut and covered. The little bunk windows were already closed from earlier, but I double-checked them anyway, pressing my palm against the glass just to be sure. The RV suddenly felt really small, like it wasn't big enough between us and whatever was out there, like we needed more space and more protection. And then just as I finished pulling the last blind shut over the small kitchen window, we heard this clattering noise, like something had knocked over the cooler outside. I knew that sound. It was plastic scraping hard against the dirt, followed by the rattle and clink 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 of cans spilling out. But it didn't sound like something was just brushing past it and accidentally knocked it over. It sounded like someone picked it up and threw it. Cadence gasped and backed onto the couch. I crouched low, my heart slamming in my chest, and grabbed the only thing in reach, this little kitchen knife with a magnetic strip on it. The blade was maybe 6 inches long, cheap steel, but it was something. It was useless probably, but holding it made me feel like I had at least some kind of control. Cadence sat down on the edge of the couch, hugging her belly with both arms, trying to breathe slow, but I could hear the panic in every breath that she took. I looked at her and I said, "We're okay. We locked the door, it can't get in." She didn't answer, just nodded kind of quickly. Her eyes were flicking back and forth like she was waiting for something to come through the damn wall. And I stayed crouched by the door, knife in one hand, the other resting on the little fold-down table for balance. My mouth was dry, and my ears felt like they were working overtime trying to pick up every sound from outside. But it was dead quiet for a few seconds. It didn't stay like that for long, though. There was this noise, soft at first, kind of like a whisper, but it made the hair on my arms stand up straight. It was this scritch sound on the door. It was slow and careful, like claws or nails dragging lightly down the metal siding, starting at the door, then moving off to the side. Back and forth, like whatever was out there was tracing the edge of the door frame, testing it, maybe seeing if it could get in. I thought, what in the hell kind of animal could do that? And then it started moving around the RV. We could hear it clearly, whatever it was, because its claws scratched in long, dragging passes across the wall. Cadence had both hands over her mouth now, and her eyes were wide and wet. She was trying not to make a sound, but I could see her shoulders hitching every few seconds in these silent sobs. And then we started smelling this nasty smell. I know a lot of people talk about this smell, but I want to emphasize just how disgusting it was. At first I thought maybe something in the RV went bad. Maybe there was some food in the fridge or something rotting in the trash. This was thick and wet, like the air itself had gone rancid. Imagine a soaking wet dog that's been rolling in dead animal, mixed with the stench of old meat that was left out in the sun, and something sharp, almost chemical, like hot garbage baking on a summer sidewalk. That's what I was smelling. I gagged. I had to breathe through my mouth, but even then I could still, I don't know, taste that smell. It didn't smell like any wild animal I'd ever been around. It smelled wrong, off, like something was definitely different about it. And then the scratching started up again, this time on the far side of the RV. The scratches were long and deliberate. This thing was dragging its claws around the perimeter of the RV. It was circling us, steadying us. I thought it was testing the walls. Hell, looking back, I think it was learning. I couldn't take the waiting anymore, though. I climbed up onto the top bunk as quiet as I could, heart pounding so hard I felt like it echoed inside the RV. And I eased up one corner of the blind, just enough to peek outside without drawing any attention. I needed to know what we were up against, because I had a sister and a baby in there that I needed to protect. I love my sister very much, and the fact that she was carrying a life inside of her made me even more protective over her. At first, I didn't see anything, just the dark tree line, and the moonlight that was catching on leaves. And then something passed by the window. It was upright, like it was walking on two legs. I froze and actually had to stop myself from yelling in shock. My hand flew to my mouth as I stifled that cry. It was tall, way taller than any person I've ever seen, and definitely way taller than me. It had to be closer to 8 feet tall, honestly. Shit, maybe even more. Its shoulders were hunched forward like it was used to moving on all fours, but it stayed back straight enough to walk on two legs. I could see long arms. They were swinging just a little with each step, and it was covered in dark fur. Black or maybe dark gray. It was hard to tell in that lighting. The head was like a wolf's. It had a long snout and ears that pointed up high, but not floppy. It didn't look like some cheap Halloween mask or costume. It looked real. Coarse fur, a wet-looking nose, lips pulled back just a little, like this horrible mix of a snarl and a smile. It didn't move like a man or a dog. It walked too smooth for something that big, but you could still feel the weight of it. As it moved, every step looked like it could break a tree trunk, and the RV kind of shifted in its weight. The movement was fluid, but also heavy, like it didn't care how loud it was, or that we knew that it was outside. And then it turned its head a little and looked right at the RV just for a second. I closed the blind, hoping that it didn't see me, and I crawled down by my sister. And then all of a sudden, wham! It slammed into the side of it. The whole RV shook like we'd been hit by a truck. Cadence yelped and dropped to the floor, hands over her head. I dropped down beside her. The knife was still in my hand, like it would do any damn good. "I think it's trying to scare us out," I whispered to her. She didn't respond, just shook her head. She was frozen, hugging her knees, staring at the floor like she was somewhere else completely. And then all we could do was wait. We were trapped inside of that damn RV with some kind of monster outside, and I sure as hell wasn't risking my sister's life. It went on like that for what felt like hours, but realistically, probably 15, maybe 20 minutes tops. But in that moment, every second stretched out, tight and unbearable. The scratching just kept moving back and forth. Went to one side, and then the other. Sometimes it stopped for long stretches, and we'd hold our breath thinking that maybe it was gone. But then it started again, slow and deliberate, claws dragging against metal, and the soft sound of heavy footfalls outside. Every once in a while, I think it got close enough to where the weight would shift the RV, and everything would kind of rattle next to it. Cadence had gone dead silent. She wasn't even crying anymore, just sitting there, arms around her belly, rocking slightly without even realizing it, I don't think. I didn't try to talk. I didn't want to draw attention. I just sat across from her, still holding that stupid little kitchen knife, sweat pouring down my back but shivering like I had a fever. And then suddenly, headlights. Beautiful, miraculous headlights. These bright beams cut through the cracks in the blinds, and the roar of an engine roared behind us. I didn't think that I'd ever been so happy to hear a damn pickup truck. The RV shook again, but this time I knew it wasn't the creature. It was the vibration from the truck pulling up fast and hard. I jumped up and yanked one blind open just a little. Saw the truck angled weird in front of the RV. Mark was driving, Jess was in the passenger seat, and Ricky was in the back. The look on their faces. Mouths open, eyes huge, like they just saw something unbelievable. I knew they saw that damn thing too. And then the noise outside changed. There was a crashing sound. Something big tearing off into the woods. Mark later told us he saw something on all fours dart off into the trees as headlights hit it. He said it looked like a wolf bear at first, hunched up weird, real long limbs. Parts of it looked hairless, like mangy or burned. It was too thin for a bear, but too big to be a dog or a wolf. Jess screamed the second she saw it. She said it looked like some kind of deformed dog with a big head, crawling off into the woods. She'd said she'd never seen anything move that fast. Ricky, I don't know what he saw. He just wouldn't talk about it. I didn't wait for that damn thing to come back. I flung the RV door open and yelled, "We need to get out of here." Cadence grabbed my arm and we bolted. She moved fast, considering, and Mark already had the truck in gear by the time we reached the door. Ricky pushed it open from the inside and pulled Cadence in. I dove in after her. No one said anything for a second. We just drove. Tires were kicking up dirt, the cooler and the camping chairs were forgotten behind us, and I didn't even give a crap. Jess kept looking out the rearview window like it might be chasing us. It wasn't, but I didn't stop looking over my shoulder until we were back on the highway. Mark just drove. Faster than he should have, but I didn't care about that either. His knuckles were white on the wheel, and I could tell that he saw something he couldn't explain either. The tires bounced over every rut and root on the dirt path until we got to the highway, but nobody complained. We just needed to be out of there. The firewood was still burning back at the camp. The chairs were scattered, the cooler probably halfway across the clearing, but none of it mattered. Cadence sat between me and Ricky in the back seat, still holding her belly with both arms, like she was trying to protect the baby from what just happened. Her face was pale, eyes wide, lips pressed into a tight line. I had my arm around her, but she barely reacted, just kept shaking. I told her we were safe now, that we were out of there. She just nodded and laid her head on my shoulder. I looked back once more. It was through the rearview window. We hit the edge of the woods. The trees were behind us. It was just black and empty, like nothing had been there. Once we got back on the main road, people finally started to talk. Mark just kept asking, "What the hell was that? What the hell was that?" Just over and over, but no one had an answer for him. Ricky finally said he saw it. He said it wasn't a bear or a dog. Swore on it, but still wouldn't tell us exactly what he thought it was. And Jess, for whatever she thought it was, just kind of cried quietly. I didn't say much. I got a really good look at this thing. Cadence didn't say much either. She at least had seen this thing's face and knew what we were looking at. I just kept thinking about that cold, the way that it hit me even through the night that was muggy and hot. I've never felt that kind of cold before or since. It's like it came from the inside out, like the fear itself was freezing my bones or something. We went straight back to Atlanta that night. Didn't even stop to pee. None of us had camped there since. Hell, I haven't even looked at Lake Hartwell on a map. I don't want to. The hell with that. There's things out there like that in the forest, then I want to be as far away from the forest as possible. Whatever it was that we saw, it wasn't meant to be seen. After we got home, we didn't say much about what happened then either. None of us reported it, didn't call the park rangers or the cops, or post anything online. We just told our close family. And even then, it was just bits and pieces, really. Everyone in that little group remembers the same things clearly. Cadence had her baby later that year. Healthy, strong kid. Nothing unusual about the pregnancy after that night, thankfully. And he has one hell of a middle name. Daniel. But sometimes, when we all get together, someone will eventually bring it up quietly, almost like we're checking to see if anyone else still feels the same way. You know what? We all do. Everybody that saw it that night knows that there's things out there that shouldn't really be out there. Honestly, I wonder what would have happened if Mark, Jess, and Ricky had taken just a few more minutes to get back. Would it have come right for us? Or would it have just waited and watched, waiting for the right moment to attack? Greetings, creatures of the night. Don't forget, my novel, The Gryffyn Chronicles Volume 1, is available on Amazon.com. The link to that book is in the description below. Don't miss your chance to read it. It's available on Kindle, paperback, and hardcover. I would love to hear what you guys think about my book.